Hi, welcome to TechSR. In this video, we're going to see about a repository design pattern which is a part of the structural design pattern. You can see more about the design patterns in the link which I have given at top, and also you can find the link in the description. Before going to the definition for repository design pattern, first we see why we need repository design pattern. We can see this with an example in the project which was created in Visual Studio. This is a customer web API project which we created as a part of a previous tutorial. So you can see this video in my channel, and also I will share those links in the description. You can refer them. So if you look at this project, it is a basic CRUD operation like get, create, update and delete. So here we can see we're using a static data here. For customers, we're using static data. It returns a list of customers, or adding, we're going to add a customer in the existing list. For delete, we're going to delete from the existing list. So this one we can use while creating an API. Initially, during the development of web API, so we try to create a static data like this, and based on that we're going to create some business logics for this. But if you look at here, we are deleting the data from the list or updating the data from the list. So what will happen if you are actually using the data from the database? So that also we have covered in one of the YouTube videos. So I will show that as a screenshot for now. You can see here now in get customer and create customer, instead of the static list, we are fetching data from the DB context and showing it here. But to make this change, we need to change the business logic inside this every actions also. So this is not a preferred method, right? So what will happen in case today we are using this like a SQL database, and tomorrow if we're going to use MongoDB or any other database, so this context will change and the business logic also will change. So it will make difficult for developers to keep on changing this. And the second problem here is, let's say there are two teams are working. So one team is taking care of the database and second team is working on the business logic things. So in those case, if someone wants to modify the data, like here we are getting first or default, so instead of that I need to fetch data based on some different condition. So in those case, a second team, like the first team which we are working on that database, need to update this query. So if they update this, the second team which we mentioned like business logic team, they also need to update their unit test case and need to recheck it again. So it will make the thing complex, right? So that is the problem we are seeing here. Let's see how repository pattern solves this. Okay, so let's consider this example. So this is the structure which we've seen in the Visual Studio recently. So this employee controller having 4 methods called index, add, update and delete, and it interacts with the entity framework to get the data. Entity framework in the sense it's entity framework or any data sets we are interacting, and then it fetches data from the database and returns to our business logic. Now we can apply repository pattern to this example itself. So now we can see this is the same as a controller. Now instead of communicating directly to the entity framework, we first communicating to a service which is called employee repository. So we are calling the method get all, get by ID, insert, update or delete. This communicates with the entity framework, and entity framework communicates with the SQL server and returns the data back to the repository itself. So in this case, we can entirely replace its entity framework with any data set we have. It's a MongoDB or a static set or whatever. Our business logic will remain same in all the cases. So let me explain this in the Visual Studio itself once again. We can take this customer controller as an example itself. I will explain you in detail about how to create a repository in code. So now we can just focus on the logic alone. So we can see here, right? So this is the controller, and here we are not fetching or anything from database or any data source. So we are simply communicating with customer service and getting the customer service dot create. So we just have one customer service and we are interacting with the data set using this. So if we go to this customer service, we can see all the details are mentioned here. It is actually extending from an interface. So if we go to the customer interface, it has a methods to get all customers, create, update and delete. So we can use various data source by inheriting this interface. So if I need a static data source, I will use this customer static service. So in this service, I am using a static data and returning the information from this. And in case if I need a dynamic data from a DB, I will use this service. So this service returns the data from database. But my controller will remain same in this case, whatever the data set may be. So if I am developing a this application for a first time. I don't have any information from the database. So what I will do is I will create a static service and have some static data and work on my logics. In case if a database logics has been implemented by some other team which I mentioned earlier, in that case also we don't need to modify our existing methods. It will remain same as it is. We can simply switch between the source which we need using the program.cs file. So in this file we will use a dependency injection for our service which we created. So you can see here, right? So we have used iCustomer service and I am using customer service. So the customer service is a data which fetch data from the database. So instead of that, if I need a static data, I can just simply type customer static service. Then this in turn will return the data from this customer static service. So by having a simple settings, I can switch between the various data source. And also one more advantage of using this approach is our code looks clean. And second point is, when it comes to unit testing, we can easily test this controller without having the dependency of the services. So maybe I can add a separate video for unit testing later. For now, this will be useful for unit testing, that you can assume. Now we can go back to the definition of the repository pattern. So what is repository design pattern? Repository design pattern in C# mediates between the domain and data mapping layers using collection-like interface for accessing a domain objects. So this is what we have seen. So we can just use a simple term. It acts as a middleman or a middle layer between rest of the application data access logic. So if you look at here, so this is the data access layer and this is the business logic. So it acts as, this repository pattern acts as a mediate between these two, and it actually hides the information which are being retrieved from this data section. I hope you would have got a basic information about the repository design pattern and how it works, and also the advantages of using this design pattern. To get more useful information like this, subscribe to TechSR. Thanks for watching.